The paw prints appeared before sunrise, pressed deep into fresh snow that no living creature should have been able to cross. Each print was larger than a man's hand, perfectly clear despite the blizzard that had raged through the night. Hunters stopped at the edge of the forest and refused to follow them. Old women closed their shutters and whispered forgotten prayers. Even the village dogs lowered their tails and hid beneath wagons, refusing to look toward the mountains. Some said the tracks belonged to wolves that guarded the spirits of kings. Others believed they were left by creatures that carried the lost into the endless snow. No one dared test either story. No one except a quiet young healer whose heart had always listened to suffering more closely than fear. Before the sun disappeared behind the frozen peaks that evening, those strange paw prints would lead her beneath a mountain where an impossible secret had slept beneath ice for centuries. There, chained by darkness and surrounded by silence, waited the missing Alpha King. And without knowing it, the gentle woman who had never lifted a sword would become the last hope of an entire kingdom. Winter ruled the Kingdom of Frostmere longer than anyone could remember. The snow had covered the valleys so completely that roads disappeared beneath endless sheets of white. Pine forests stood frozen beneath heavy blankets of ice, their branches bending until they seemed ready to break beneath the weight of another storm. Rivers no longer sang through the valleys. They slept beneath thick crystal shells that reflected the pale winter sky like polished glass. Even the wind sounded different. It no longer rushed joyfully through the mountains. Instead, it carried a lonely whistle that drifted through empty fields and abandoned watchtowers like a voice searching for someone who would never answer. The people of Frostmere had grown used to hardship. Children learned to gather firewood before they learned to read. Farmers stored enough grain to survive months without seeing green grass. Travelers measured journeys not by distance, but by how many storms stood between one village and the next. Yet something had changed this winter. Something no one could explain. The wolves had stopped singing beneath the moon. For generations, every full moon filled the northern forests with long, powerful howls that echoed across the mountains until dawn. Those voices had always comforted the people. They were reminders that the ancient guardians still watched over the kingdom. Now the forests had become silent. Too silent. Silence frightened people far more than noise ever could. Rumors spread faster than snowfall. Some claimed monsters had awakened beneath the white peaks. Others whispered that an old curse had finally returned. Many believed the disappearance of the Alpha King had doomed them all. No messenger had seen him in nearly 3 weeks. No royal scout had returned from the northern mountains. Even the wolves themselves seemed to be searching. Every morning, frightened villagers woke to find enormous paw prints circling empty farms before disappearing back into the wilderness. No livestock had been taken. No people had vanished. The wolves searched. For whom, nobody knew. Far from the grand castles and stone cities of Frostmere, hidden beside a quiet river that now slept beneath frozen ice, stood a tiny wooden cottage wrapped in climbing ivy that had long since turned silver beneath the frost. Smoke curled gently from its crooked chimney. Inside lived Elara. She owned almost nothing. A worn wooden table stood beside the fire. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the ceiling beams. Clay jars filled with roots, flowers, and healing oils lined handmade shelves. Everything smelled of cedar, lavender, pine needles, and warm bread fresh from the oven. People often forgot how poor she was because she never complained. She simply smiled. Each morning before dawn she collected herbs hidden beneath snow-covered rocks, checked traps that captured only rabbits she later released if they were healthy, and visited elderly villagers too weak to gather firewood. No payment was ever expected. Sometimes people left fresh eggs outside her door. Sometimes a loaf of bread. Sometimes nothing at all. She thanked them anyway. The villagers often wondered why someone so gentle had chosen such a lonely life. The truth rested inside an old wooden chest beneath her bed. Every evening, after finishing her work, Elara opened the chest and carefully unfolded a faded wool blanket embroidered with silver wolves. It had belonged to her mother. She remembered very little about the woman. Only warm hands, soft songs, and the way wolves sometimes appeared outside their cottage without ever causing harm. Her mother had disappeared during a winter storm many years earlier. Some believed she had become lost. Others quietly insisted the wolves had taken her. Elara never believed either story completely. She simply hoped one day she would understand. That hope never faded. Not even after all these years. As dawn painted pale gold across the eastern mountains, she stepped outside carrying a basket filled with empty glass bottles for collecting melted spring water. The cold struck her cheeks immediately. Her breath drifted before her in slow white clouds. Everything seemed ordinary. Until she looked down. Fresh paw prints stretched across the snow only a few feet from her front door. She froze. They were enormous. Each print pressed deep into the frozen ground, as though whatever had made them carried incredible weight. Yet they were strangely elegant. Not chaotic. Not wild. Purposeful. They crossed directly before her cottage before continuing toward the northern mountains. She slowly knelt beside the nearest print. Snow still crumbled gently around its edges. It had been made only moments ago. Her fingertips hovered above it without touching. Something about it felt warm. Not with heat. With life. With intention. A faint breeze drifted through the trees. The nearby ravens suddenly flew from their branches all at once, disappearing into the grey sky. Even the forest seemed to be watching. Don't follow them. The voice startled her. Old Brenner, the village trapper, stood beside the road carrying a bundle of firewood across his shoulders. His weathered face had gone pale. "I've seen those tracks before," he said quietly. "They never lead anyone home." Elara stood. "They're wounded." The old man frowned. "What?" She pointed farther along the trail. Tiny crimson drops stained the untouched snow. Not many. Just enough. Fresh blood. Brenner looked away immediately. "You leave that to the mountains. It could be dying. It could be something pretending to die." His voice became almost a whisper. "The old stories warn us for a reason." Elara glanced once more toward the endless forest. The blood continued between the giant paw prints before vanishing into towering pines. Whoever, or whatever, had passed here was injured. That thought settled deeper inside her than fear ever could. "If someone was hurt," she asked softly, "wouldn't you hope another person came?" The old trapper sighed. His tired eyes lowered toward the snow. "You always ask questions that make courage sound simple." She smiled sadly. "It never feels simple." He reached into his coat and handed her a small iron charm shaped like a mountain tree. "My wife carried this." She accepted it carefully. "It won't stop monsters." "What will it stop?" He managed the smallest smile. "It'll remind you somebody hopes you come back." She thanked him and tucked the charm beneath her cloak. The forest waited. After packing dried meat, healing herbs, clean bandages, flint, rope, and a thick wool blanket into her travel satchel, she secured her heavy boots and wrapped another scarf around her neck. No one tried stopping her. Word spread quickly through the village. People watched silently from windows. A baker removed his cap. Children clutched their mother's hands. An elderly woman quietly made the sign of blessing toward the mountains. No one believed they would see her again. Elara paused only once at the edge of the forest. The wind carried the scent of pine resin, snow, and distant cedar smoke fading behind her. Ahead lay only silence. Then, a single, low howl rolled across the mountains. Not angry. Not threatening. Lonely. It echoed through every frozen tree before disappearing into the endless white horizon. She tightened her grip on her walking staff. One careful step became another. Soon the village vanished behind curtains of falling snow. The towering pines swallowed the narrow trail until even daylight struggled to reach the ground. Above her, unseen among the branches, snow slipped from heavy limbs with soft whispers. Somewhere ahead, the giant paw prints continued their steady path into the heart of the wilderness. She followed them without knowing that hidden high upon the cliffs, a pair of cold eyes watched every step she took. And far beyond those silent ridges, beneath a mountain sealed by ancient ice, a wounded king struggled to take one more breath before darkness claimed him forever. Morning never truly arrived inside the northern forest. The light that filtered through the towering pines was pale and distant, as though the sun itself feared the land beyond the white peaks. Snow drifted endlessly between the ancient trunks, settling over fallen branches and moss-covered stones until every path looked the same. Elara walked slowly. Each step sank deep into the fresh snow with a quiet crunch that disappeared almost as soon as it was made. The enormous paw prints remained before her. Perfect. Steady. Never wandering. Whatever creature had left them walked with purpose, even while wounded. She stopped beside another crimson stain scattered across the snow. The blood had frozen into tiny crystals that shimmered like red glass beneath the grey sky. She knelt, touching the edge of one frozen drop. Still fresh. Her heart tightened. The wounded animal could not be far ahead. The forest had become strangely quiet. Not a bird called from the branches. Not a squirrel darted across the trees. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Only the distant groan of ancient ice echoed somewhere beyond the mountains. It sounded like the earth itself was slowly waking from a long sleep. Hours passed. The climb grew steeper. The pines slowly disappeared behind her, replaced by towering cliffs wrapped in frozen waterfalls that glittered beneath weak sunlight. Snow swirled endlessly across narrow ridges. Sharp rocks disappeared beneath smooth blankets of white, making every step uncertain. Several times Elara nearly slipped into hidden crevices. Each time she steadied herself with her walking staff before continuing. Turning back never crossed her mind. The farther she climbed, the more signs she discovered that something terrible had happened here. Half buried beneath drifting snow rested a broken shield. She brushed away the frost. The silver crest of Frostmere's royal guard appeared beneath her fingertips. Its surface had been deeply slashed by claws larger than any bear's. Nearby lay a shattered spear. Farther ahead rested a torn blue cloak frozen beneath the ice. No bodies remained. Only silence. Only questions. She looked toward the towering peaks. What happened here? The mountains answered only with another cold gust of wind. As afternoon faded, dark clouds rolled across the sky. Snow began falling harder. Within minutes the trail nearly disappeared beneath fresh drifts. The giant paw prints remained visible. Almost impossibly so. It was as though the storm refused to erase them. The thought sent a quiet shiver through her. She adjusted her hood and continued climbing. The air grew thinner. Every breath burned inside her lungs. Her fingers had become numb despite the thick wool gloves wrapped around them. Still she refused to stop. Just before dusk, the tracks rounded a massive wall of black stone. Elara followed carefully, then froze. Across the open ridge stood 6 enormous white wolves. They appeared without warning. Silent. Motionless. Snow rested across their thick winter coats without melting. Each wolf stood nearly as tall as her shoulders. Broad chests. Powerful legs. Eyes the color of polished amber. Their breath drifted slowly into the freezing air. None growled. None bared their teeth. They simply watched. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct begged her to run. Yet something inside those golden eyes stopped her. There was no hunger. No anger. Only careful observation. The largest wolf stepped forward. Its fur shone almost silver beneath the fading light. A long scar crossed one side of its face, disappearing beneath its thick coat. The old wolf lowered its massive head. Not in submission. Not in threat. In recognition. Slowly, Elara lowered her walking staff until it rested against the snow. "I won't hurt you," she whispered. The wolves remained perfectly still. A cold breeze carried the scent of pine and ice between them. After several long moments, the scarred wolf turned away. Without looking back, it began walking toward the cliffs. The others followed. After only a few steps, the leader paused. It looked over its shoulder. Waiting. Elara understood. "They want me to follow." The words escaped her lips before she realized she had spoken them aloud. She glanced behind her. The mountain path had already vanished beneath fresh snow. There was no way back until morning. Taking a slow breath, she followed the wolves. The climb became stranger with every passing minute. The wolves moved with perfect silence across ground where no ordinary animal could have kept its footing. They slipped between towering pillars of ice and narrow stone passages hidden from anyone below. At last they reached a cliff that appeared solid from every angle. The scarred wolf disappeared through it. Elara blinked. Only when she stepped closer did she notice the narrow opening concealed behind hanging sheets of frozen ice. The entrance was invisible unless someone stood directly before it. She hesitated. Cold air flowed from the darkness within. It smelled different. Older. Not simply of stone. It carried the scent of ancient cedar, damp earth, and something else. Magic. The wolves entered without fear. Gathering her courage, Elara followed. The passage twisted deep beneath the mountain. The walls sparkled with crystals trapped inside ancient ice. Soft blue light glowed from veins of frozen stone, casting moving reflections across the tunnel as though stars had somehow become trapped underground. The deeper she walked, the quieter the world became. Soon even the storm outside disappeared. Only her breathing remained. Then, a sound. Low. Painful. A single breath. Another followed. Heavy enough to make tiny crystals fall from the ceiling. The tunnel widened. Elara stepped into a vast underground chamber. She forgot how to breathe. The cave stretched farther than her eyes could follow. Towering pillars of crystal reached toward a ceiling lost in darkness. Ancient carvings covered the icy walls. Wolves. Kings. Moon symbols. Forests. Battles fought long before anyone living had been born. In the center of the chamber rested a creature unlike anything she had ever imagined. A gigantic black wolf. Its fur shimmered like midnight beneath moonlight. Even lying on the frozen ground, it stood taller than any horse she had ever seen. Every slow breath lifted its enormous chest before another painful shudder passed through its body. Its sides were marked with deep wounds. One shoulder had been pierced by jagged black crystals that pulsed with an unnatural crimson glow. Dark chains wrapped around its powerful legs and neck. The chains disappeared into ancient stone pillars surrounding the chamber. Strange runes burned across every link. Each pulse of red light forced another painful tremor through the great wolf's body. Elara took one cautious step forward. The wolf's eyes opened. Silver. Not yellow. Not blue. Silver like moonlight reflecting across frozen lakes. Eyes filled with exhaustion. And unmistakable intelligence. For one terrifying heartbeat, they simply looked at each other. The wolves surrounding the chamber lowered themselves onto the icy floor. None showed fear. They waited. The black wolf tried to rise. The enchanted chains tightened instantly. A deep growl echoed through the cavern, not one of anger, but of unbearable pain. The creature collapsed again. Its breathing became ragged. Elara's gaze drifted toward the iron collar around its neck. Half buried beneath frost hung a broken silver emblem. She stepped closer. Brushing away the ice, she revealed the symbol beneath. A wolf standing before a mountain beneath a full moon. The royal crest. Her eyes widened. No. She had seen that emblem only once before. Painted high above the throne inside Frostmere Castle during a festival many years earlier. It belonged to only one being in the entire kingdom. The Alpha King. The missing guardian of Frostmere. The protector whose disappearance had thrown every village into fear. He had not abandoned his people. He had been imprisoned. Hidden where no one would ever find him. Elara looked slowly around the chamber. The chains. The poison. The ancient prison. This had never been an accident. Someone had planned every detail. Someone powerful enough to hide an entire king beneath a mountain. Someone who expected him never to escape. A chill colder than the winter outside settled into her bones. Then she noticed something else. Near the entrance of the cavern, half hidden behind a pillar, fresh human footprints marked the thin layer of snow carried in from outside. Not hers. Someone else had been here. Recently. And somewhere beyond the darkness, unseen eyes were still watching. Elara remained perfectly still. The fresh footprints near the entrance refused to leave her thoughts. They were sharp around the edges, untouched by drifting frost, as though the person who had made them had departed only a short while ago. Whoever had imprisoned the great wolf might still be somewhere beyond the mountain, waiting for the prison to finish what the chains had begun. The circle of white wolves did not move. Their ears remained turned toward the tunnel behind her, listening for sounds too distant for human hearing. The great black wolf lay motionless except for the slow rise and fall of his chest. Each breath seemed to demand every ounce of strength left inside him. Elara forced herself to look away from the footprints. Someone had to help him first. Everything else could wait. She slowly removed her heavy satchel and knelt several steps away from the enormous creature. "I know you're frightened," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the dripping water echoing through the cave. "But so am I." The wolf did not answer. Only those silver eyes remained fixed on her. There was no hatred inside them. Only exhaustion. And something even harder to bear. Hope that had almost died. Elara carefully spread a wool blanket across the frozen ground before opening her satchel. Glass bottles. Bundles of dried herbs. Small wooden boxes filled with healing powders. Neatly folded bandages. Every item had been prepared for ordinary travelers. Nothing she carried had ever been meant to treat a creature as large as the one lying before her. Still, pain was pain. It deserved kindness, no matter its size. She reached toward the nearest wound but stopped just short of touching him. The black wolf watched every movement. His breathing grew heavier. "I need to see the injury." The enormous head lowered only slightly. "Permission." Very slowly, Elara placed one trembling hand against his shoulder. His fur was unbelievably thick, soft beneath the frost, yet beneath it she could feel powerful muscles trembling from weakness. The wound was far worse than she had imagined. Jagged black crystals had buried themselves deep into the flesh beneath his shoulder blade. They pulsed with dull crimson light, spreading thin dark veins beneath his skin like frozen lightning. She had seen poisoned wounds before. Nothing like this. The crystals were alive. Not living in the way trees or wolves lived, but animated by some cruel enchantment. Each pulse drained another piece of the wolf's strength. The chains surrounding him glowed brighter every time the crystals pulsed. "They're feeding each other," she murmured. She leaned closer, studying the strange runes carved into the iron links. Her grandmother's old lessons returned one by one. Not as clear memories. As feelings. Long winter evenings beside the fireplace. The smell of cedar smoke. Wrinkled hands tracing faded symbols across old books. "There are wounds," her grandmother had once said, "that belong to the body." She remembered carefully crushing herbs inside a wooden bowl. "And there are wounds tied to curses." Her grandmother had looked directly into her eyes. "Treat the wrong one first." The old woman had gently blown the crushed leaves into the fire. "And both will consume the patient." Elara closed her eyes. She understood now. Removing the crystals first might strengthen the curse. Breaking the chains first might allow the poison to spread through his heart. There had to be another way. She searched through her satchel until she found a small leather pouch tied with blue thread. Moonroot. Her grandmother had treasured it above every other herb. She had always warned never to waste it. It calms what darkness tries to awaken. Only 3 dried roots remained. Elara crushed one carefully between 2 smooth stones. The sweet scent of pine blossoms filled the cold cave. Mixing the powder with melted snow inside a wooden bowl, she slowly formed a pale silver paste. "I don't know if this will help." She smiled softly. "But I hope you'll forgive me if it tastes terrible." For the first time, the great wolf's ears twitched. Almost as though he understood the gentle humor. She spread the mixture around the wound instead of directly onto the crystals. The effect was immediate. The crimson glow weakened. Not completely, but enough for the dark veins beneath his skin to stop spreading. The great wolf released a slow breath. Not a growl. Not a roar. A sigh. One filled with relief. The surrounding wolves lowered their heads. The cave itself seemed quieter. Encouraged, Elara continued working. Hour after hour passed beneath the mountain. She cleaned each wound with warm water heated over a tiny fire she built inside a sheltered corner of the cavern. She stitched torn flesh where she could, wrapped thick bandages around bleeding injuries, and carefully avoided the cursed crystals buried near his shoulder. Outside, night swallowed the mountains. The wind screamed through narrow passes, shaking loose curtains of snow that slid down distant cliffs. Inside the hidden sanctuary, only firelight danced across walls carved by forgotten hands. The wolves remained awake. None slept. Each guarded a different tunnel leading into the cavern. From time to time one disappeared silently into the darkness before another returned to replace it. They were watching, waiting, protecting. Near midnight, Elara's own strength began to fade. Her fingers ached from the cold. Her eyes burned. She leaned back against the icy wall, wrapping both hands around a wooden cup of warm pine tea. The enormous wolf still watched her. "You haven't slept either." The silver eyes blinked once. She laughed quietly. "I suppose kings don't listen when healers tell them to rest." The sound of her laughter echoed softly beneath the mountain. For a brief moment, the cave no longer felt like a prison. Then everything changed. A deep crack echoed through the chamber. The runes carved into the chains flashed with violent red light. The crystals inside the wolf's shoulder pulsed brighter than before. The alpha threw back his head. A roar exploded through the cavern. Not one of rage. One of agony. The force of it shook loose icicles from the ceiling. The wolves instantly leaped to their feet. Several rushed toward their king while others raced for the tunnel entrances. Elara hurried forward. The chains were tightening. She could actually hear the iron grinding against itself. The runes glowed like burning coals. The poison was fighting back. She grabbed another handful of moonroot before stopping. There wasn't enough left. Using it all now might save him tonight. But leave nothing for tomorrow. Her eyes darted across the walls. Ancient carvings stretched from floor to ceiling. Most showed wolves standing beneath full moons. Others showed kings placing their hands upon standing stones. One carving caught her attention. A woman. Not a queen. Not a warrior. A healer. She stood with one hand against a wounded wolf while her other rested upon a stone covered in glowing symbols. Between them flowed streams of light. No herbs. No weapons. Only trust. Elara looked slowly toward the nearest stone pillar. It bore the same symbols. She approached carefully. The ancient rock felt warmer than the surrounding ice. Almost alive. Without thinking, she rested her palm against its smooth surface. The instant her skin touched the stone, warmth rushed through her arm. A blinding silver light burst across the cavern. The wolves stepped back. The chains trembled. The glowing runes flickered wildly. Elara gasped. A strange warmth spread across the back of her hand. She looked down. Just beneath her wrist, hidden until this very moment, a delicate mark slowly appeared beneath her skin. It resembled a wolf formed from moonlight. Its outline shimmered softly before settling into a pale silver glow. The great black wolf stared at it. His silver eyes widened. For the first time since she had found him, he spoke. Not with his mouth. Not aloud. The words echoed gently inside her heart like distant wind crossing frozen lakes. The first wolves have chosen again. Elara's breath caught. She looked around in disbelief. The wolves had heard it too. Every one of them lowered its head. Not to their king. To her. Before she could understand what had happened, a sharp howl shattered the silence outside. Then another. Then many more. Not the calm voices of guardians. Warning cries. The wolves at the tunnel entrance growled deeply. One raced back from the darkness, its white fur stained with fresh blood across its shoulder. It collapsed near the Alpha King before struggling back onto trembling legs. An arrow protruded from its side. Moments later, the unmistakable sound of armored boots echoed through the frozen tunnels. Someone had found the hidden sanctuary. And they were no longer searching. They were coming to finish the hunt. The echo of armored boots rolled through the frozen passages like distant thunder. One pair. Then another. Then dozens. The sound bounced from wall to wall until it became impossible to tell how many hunters were approaching. Somewhere beyond the winding tunnels, metal scraped against stone, followed by the low murmur of men who believed their prey had nowhere left to run. The white wolves reacted at once. The scarred elder sprang toward the entrance, his deep growl rumbling through the cavern. Two younger wolves rushed beside him while others spread out across the chamber, silently taking positions they had likely prepared long before this day. They had defended this sanctuary many times, but never with so little hope. Elara rose to her feet, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. The silver mark upon her hand still glowed faintly, warming her skin like a living ember. She barely noticed it. Her eyes remained fixed on the dark tunnel. They found us. The Alpha King slowly lifted himself despite the chains that still bound his legs. Every movement looked painful. His massive muscles trembled beneath his midnight black fur, yet he stood taller than any creature Elara had ever seen. The moment his paws touched the frozen ground, the cave itself seemed to awaken. Ancient carvings hidden within the walls shimmered beneath pale blue light. The wolves lowered themselves instinctively. Not because they feared him. Because even wounded, their king carried a presence that demanded respect. His silver eyes drifted toward Elara. This time the voice inside her mind sounded clearer. "Stand behind me." She shook her head before she realized she had moved. "You can't fight." His breathing remained uneven. Dark blood still seeped from beneath the bandages she had wrapped only hours before. The cursed crystals continued glowing inside his shoulder. Yet there was calm inside his gaze. Not pride. Responsibility. Another crash echoed through the tunnel. A shower of ice fell from the ceiling. Someone was breaking through the outer passage. One of the younger wolves raced back from the darkness. Its breathing came in desperate bursts. Blood stained its white chest. It let out 2 short howls before collapsing. The elder wolf answered with a low growl. The message required no translation. The enemy had reached the final passage. The Alpha King slowly turned his head toward the far side of the cavern. Hidden behind towering crystal pillars stood a narrow opening almost invisible beneath hanging sheets of ice. Elara had not noticed it before. "The old tunnels," his voice echoed inside her mind. "They lead beneath the mountain." She stared at him. "And you?" The great wolf looked toward the entrance where shadows already flickered against the icy walls. "A king leaves last." "No." The word escaped her lips before she could stop it. The Alpha's silver eyes rested quietly upon her. "I didn't come this far to leave you here." For the first time, something almost resembling surprise crossed his ancient face. Outside the chamber came another terrible sound. A horn. Deep. Long. Its echo rolled through every tunnel beneath the mountain. The hunters had begun their assault. Arrows suddenly streaked through the entrance. One shattered against a crystal pillar. Another struck the frozen floor only a few feet away. The third found its mark. A young white wolf cried out as the arrow buried itself deep into its shoulder. The elder wolf lunged instantly. His massive body disappeared into the darkness beyond the entrance. A heartbeat later, the tunnel erupted with snarls, screams, and the clash of steel. The battle had begun. The remaining wolves charged after him. The cavern exploded into movement. Elara instinctively ran toward the injured wolf. She snapped the arrow shaft with trembling hands before pressing thick cloth against the wound. "It's all right." The wolf whimpered softly but never pulled away. "You'll live." Its frightened breathing slowly steadied beneath her gentle touch. Nearby, another thunderous roar shook the chamber. The Alpha King had risen onto his full height. With one tremendous pull, he threw his weight against the enchanted chains. The iron links screamed. Ancient runes burst into crimson light. The mountain itself seemed to groan. Again he pulled. Again the chains resisted. Dark energy surged through the cursed crystals buried inside his shoulder. His legs nearly gave way. "No!" Elara cried. She rushed toward him. The silver mark upon her hand suddenly burned with unexpected warmth. Without thinking, she reached for the nearest chain. The instant her fingers touched the cold iron, blinding light burst from the mark. Silver raced across every carved rune. The crimson glow faltered. Cracks spread along the ancient links. The Alpha looked directly into her eyes. For one suspended moment, neither spoke. Then, the first chain shattered. Its deafening crack echoed like lightning inside the cavern. The second followed. Then the third. Heavy iron crashed across the frozen floor. The remaining enchanted links loosened around the Alpha's legs. He staggered forward, finally free enough to move. Not fully healed. Not fully strong. But no longer imprisoned. A distant voice shouted from the tunnel. "There! Don't let them escape." Torches appeared in the darkness. Armored soldiers flooded into the outer chamber. Each carried black shields marked with the crimson crest of Lord Malrek. Their captain stepped forward confidently. His polished armor gleamed beneath the crystal light. A cruel smile spread across his scarred face. "So?" His voice echoed through the cave. "The beast has finally found a healer." His gaze shifted toward Elara. "And she is even smaller than I imagined." She instinctively stepped closer to the Alpha. The captain laughed. "You've risked your life for a monster." The Alpha answered with a growl so deep that frost cracked beneath his paws. Several soldiers instinctively stepped backward. Even wounded, his presence unsettled them. The captain's smile faded. "Kill the wolves." He pointed directly toward Elara. "Take the woman alive." Steel rang from scabbards. The soldiers charged. Everything happened at once. The Alpha King launched himself forward with terrifying speed despite his injuries. His massive body crashed into the first line of soldiers, sending shields and armored men tumbling across the frozen floor. The remaining wolves burst from every shadow inside the cavern. Their white forms flashed between crystal pillars like winter spirits. Steel clashed against claws. Torches scattered across the ice. Shouts became screams. Elara stumbled backward, pulling the wounded young wolf behind a pillar. The cave shook beneath the violence. She had never witnessed battle before. Nothing in her peaceful life had prepared her for its terrible beauty. The Alpha moved like a living storm. Even weakened, every leap carried impossible strength. Every strike forced another soldier backward. Yet each movement reopened the wound she had struggled all night to close. Fresh blood darkened his black fur. He was fighting on borrowed strength. He could not continue forever. The captain noticed it too. A cruel grin returned. "Keep him moving." He barked another order. "Let the poison finish him." 3 archers climbed onto a ridge overlooking the chamber. They drew black arrows shimmering with dark magic. Elara saw them. The archers. Her warning came too late. The arrows flew. One struck a crystal pillar. Another grazed the Alpha's flank. The third sped directly toward his heart. Without thinking, the scarred elder wolf leaped. His enormous body intercepted the arrow. The black shaft buried deep into his chest. For one terrible heartbeat, time itself seemed to stop. The elder landed heavily upon the frozen ground. He tried to stand. His legs refused. The Alpha's roar shook every corner of the cavern. It was not the roar of a king. It was the cry of a brother losing family. The white wolves answered as one. Their united howl rolled through the mountain with heartbreaking sorrow. The elder lifted his head one final time. His tired golden eyes met Elara's. There was no fear, only peace. As though he knew this sacrifice had always been part of his journey. His breathing slowed, then stopped. Silence lasted only a heartbeat. The Alpha closed his eyes. When they opened again, the sorrow had become resolve. He turned toward the hidden passage beyond the crystal pillars. The remaining wolves understood instantly. They began falling back one by one, protecting the narrow escape route. The captain realized their plan. "They're retreating." He pointed his sword toward the tunnel. "Seal every exit." But the wolves were already moving. The Alpha reached Elara. His wounded shoulder trembled with every breath. He lowered his head beside her. "Go." She looked once toward the fallen elder. Snow drifting through the shattered entrance had already begun settling gently across his white fur, covering him like a quiet blanket. A lump rose painfully in her throat. "I won't forget him." The Alpha lowered his head briefly beside the elder's still body. A silent farewell. Then he turned. Together, they disappeared into the forgotten tunnel beneath the mountain as the surviving wolves formed a living wall behind them, their howls echoing through the ancient darkness while Lord Malrek's soldiers gave relentless chase. The forgotten tunnel swallowed them whole. Darkness closed around Elara as the echoes of battle faded behind layers of ancient stone. The narrow passage twisted beneath the mountain like the roots of an enormous tree, its walls glistening with veins of blue crystal that pulsed faintly beneath the ice. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, steady rhythms, each drop echoing through the silence like the ticking of an invisible clock. Behind them, the surviving white wolves moved without a sound. No one looked back. There was nothing left to save in the hidden sanctuary. The Elder Guardian had given his life so the Alpha King could live. His sacrifice now rested upon every step they took. Elara's chest felt painfully tight. She had known the old wolf for only a few hours. Yet she mourned him as though she had lost an old friend. She remembered the way he had lowered his head instead of baring his teeth. The calm wisdom inside his golden eyes. The quiet courage that had never asked for recognition. Now those eyes would never open again. A warm nose gently brushed against her hand. She looked down. The young wolf whose shoulder she had treated earlier walked beside her despite his own injury. His limp had grown worse, but he refused to fall behind. Elara rested her hand against his neck. "We'll carry him with us." The wolf let out a soft breath, almost as if he understood. Ahead, the Alpha King slowed. Though the chains had been broken, every few steps forced him to pause. His breathing remained heavy, and fresh blood marked the icy floor behind him. The poison still lingered inside his body, draining his strength with cruel patience. Elara hurried to his side. "You need to stop." His silver eyes shifted toward her. There was exhaustion there now. Not hidden. Not denied. Simply accepted. He took another step. His legs suddenly gave way. The great black wolf collapsed against the stone with a deep, painful breath. The wolves gathered around him instantly. Some watched the tunnels. Others lowered their heads beside their king. Elara knelt without hesitation. She carefully unwound the bandages covering his shoulder. The sight stole her breath. Dark veins had spread farther across his chest. The poisoned crystals had grown. Tiny black roots now stretched deeper beneath his skin. The brief battle had fed the curse. She swallowed hard. "We're running out of time." The Alpha remained silent. His breathing echoed softly through the tunnel. She searched her satchel. Only 2 pieces of moonroot remained. Enough for 1 more treatment. Perhaps 2, if she used them carefully. Not enough. Never enough. She looked around the cavern. The passage widened into a hidden chamber untouched by time. Ancient stone pillars stood beneath a ceiling filled with glittering crystals. Moss clung to the walls despite the freezing air, and a narrow stream flowed through the center, its water so clear that every pebble beneath its surface could be counted. At the far end stood a weathered stone carved with wolves standing beneath a full moon. The moment Elara saw it, the mark on her hand began to glow again. Not painfully, gently, as though something inside the stone recognized her. Without understanding why, she stood. The Alpha watched her. "So, this is why the mark chose you." His voice no longer echoed only inside her thoughts. Though weak, it carried through the chamber in quiet, steady words. Elara turned quickly. "You can speak." A faint smile touched his face. "I always could." His voice was deep, calm, and carried the weight of countless winters. "The bond grows stronger each hour." She looked at the glowing mark. "What is it?" The Alpha's gaze settled upon the ancient stone. "It is older than every kingdom." He drew a slow breath. Long before castles rose from these valleys, before crowns, before borders, humans and wolves stood together beneath the first moon. The chamber seemed to grow quieter. The first wolves chose guardians. Not warriors. Not rulers. His silver eyes met hers. Healers. Elara frowned. "Me." They chose hearts that healed instead of conquered. His voice softened. "Your mother carried the same mark." The words struck her harder than the cold ever could. "My mother." The Alpha nodded. "I remember her." For a long moment, Elara could not speak. Every question she had buried since childhood suddenly rushed back. She wasn't taken by wolves. No. What happened to her? A shadow crossed the Alpha's face. "She saved my life." His voice became almost a whisper. "And gave her own." Silence settled over the chamber. Elara stared at the flowing stream, unable to steady her breathing. All those years. Every story. Every whispered rumor. None of them had been true. Her mother had not disappeared. She had sacrificed herself. Tears gathered quietly in Elara's eyes. She did not wipe them away. The Alpha lowered his head respectfully. She asked for only one thing before she left this world. Elara looked up. She asked that you grow with kindness, not revenge. A tear slipped down Elara's cheek. The ache inside her heart felt strangely warm. For the first time in years, she no longer wondered whether her mother had abandoned her. She knew. She had loved her until her final breath. The silver mark glowed brighter. The ancient stone answered. Light spread slowly across the carved wolves until the entire chamber shimmered beneath soft moon-colored radiance. The stream began to glow. Tiny threads of silver drifted across the water like floating stars. The wolves slowly lowered themselves onto the stone floor. Every one of them bowed. The Alpha did the same. Elara remained standing. She felt no command. Only invitation. Almost without thinking, she walked toward the ancient stone. The warmth beneath her hand returned the moment she touched its weathered surface. This time she did not see the chamber.